Hello? Can you guys see me and hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. We made it.
Yeah.
Good to see all those names in there. It's like we're in touch for a little while and then, we're finally here. Did you guys have a good holiday?
Yes, we did.
Awesome. Yeah,
Yes.
I spent like so much time just like working like a slave in our house, just like doing our floor downstairs. I was doing
Yeah.
the renovations myself, man. It's like I was so beat up every day, like 11-hour days. So I didn't rest that much, but I'm alive, so that's good. Yeah, let me start by sharing my screen here before I forget. Okay. I was actually doing some tests today because I didn't have a lot of time to test stuff around. So I installed the new Maya because I get the subscription every time I get the classes rolling. So I got Maya 2020, and so far is not too buggy. I heard lots of comments about how buggy it was. So I'm a little bit concerned because the Maya I was using before, Maya 2019, was already buggy enough. So I hope it didn't get worse. But it's expected to have, at least with XGen, lots of bugs. So we just brace ourselves for impact. But I think we're going to be okay. So yeah, today what's gonna happen? I'm gonna tell you guys a little bit about like how the class is gonna run. Point you guys to some links, like interesting links. I already have some in our page in the school. But just point you guys like to a couple of links that might be interesting. It's like books we can talk about too, and just start very slowly. What I'm gonna do, like one thing that I did in the past is like I always would refer like to a previous class that happened because I was assuming that everybody was kind of like as soon as you sign for the live class, you actually have access to the previous ones, right? Like 3 of them, and then people are kind of familiar. But then I realized that as soon as those classes are over, I actually put up like the offline version of it online, right? And then if I don't have something that's kind of like a complete in a sense, right? People kind of like get a little lost, I suppose. So I know some of you guys are very experienced, with stuff, and then I'm gonna have to torture you a little bit, just ask for your patience a little bit because we're gonna have to kind of like go very slowly and then build up because at some point it's gonna be pretty hard for everybody, including myself. It's like when you get to the tertiary forms and all that stuff. But at the beginning, let's start easy, and then you guys, I can predict what's going to happen, and every time it happens the same way. You're going to be able to follow me, kind of like it's like either doing like real time with me, like the stuff I'm going to be doing, or kind of like following up like next day, watching the recording and doing it. So for the first week and a half, I would say like it's easy to follow everything, right? And then obviously it gets a little bit harder afterwards because I have more experience, right? Like with this stuff, because a lot of those, the workflow I'm going to be showing you guys is basically like the workflow I actually created. It's like the stuff that works better for me for my personal work. And then it might sound a little alien to a couple of you guys, if you're used to different softwares and different ways of doing stuff. For example, like the workflow I use here is totally different from the workflow I would use like at work, right? Like a professional work. Because at work you depend on like many people, right? Like you're doing a lot of stuff, always counting that the next person in line. Let me just open my chat window here. Yeah, good morning. It's so funny to say good morning. I'm almost going to bed, right? um, uh, yeah, so it's very different in a way, because what I try to do with those classes is actually give you absolute control over the creation, right? Because if you're in the studio, you know how it goes. You do your modeling part and you pass the model to someone, right? Like a lighter or it's like a texture artist, like a painter, right? And then you wait a couple of days until you get something back. And then you take to the next stage. You see how the model looks, and then you do another iteration, right? You keep going, keep building iterations, like you have dailies at work, right? You kind of show it and then get back the feedback and then build on top of that. So it's a process that takes like weeks, months, because you depend on like too many people in the process. My workflow is basically like I have absolute control of everything, and then every iteration is not like it's going to take like days or weeks for me to get back from someone. I can build like 3-4 different iterations like every day if I want to. Especially like we're going to be talking about using HD geometry. It's super fast to export to displacement maps, much faster than exporting like the regular displacement maps, right? So I can export like 3 different sets of maps, like displacement maps every night if I want to, and then build more iterations with the, it's like everything we're going to be doing is going to be trying to start the scene like very early on, and then iterate on that scene, instead of like just like exploring just modeling and then moving to just, we're going to do a little bit of everything and then assemble a little scene we can work with. And then from that point on, we're going to refine and refine and refine. And that's going to be a bunch of different iterations until you get to a result that looks cool at the end, Those classes are very fun for me because especially right now, I'm doing like VR at work, and I'm not doing any like portrait work or anything like that. And that's my, I really enjoy doing this. First, because I'm really proud of the work that's being produced by the students. And one thing I'm going to tell you guys is that the students producing the coolest stuff, or not the coolest stuff, but I mean like progressing the most, are the ones with the least amount of experience, because what happens is that if you have a ton of experience, normally you're very swamped at work, right? Normally, like I got like some rock star artists that subscribe to my class, and they were not able to produce like a final piece because, it's like they are swamped. I mean, like they are doing freelance work. They have a lot of responsibilities in their studios. So it's hard, I try my best to finish the work, but as artists, we all know that's like we never finish anything. We just abandon, right? So let's see how far we can push something before we abandon it, and then move to the next thing, right? Because it burns out, right? So my intention is to give you guys all the tools. When I mentioned that I'm not hiding anything, it's completely true. You can ask any of my previous students. I try to show everything that's part of my workflow, and then sometimes it takes some time to process. It's like you have to rewatch a couple of videos, but I try to put all the information in there. Someone asked me if I give away like the brushes I use for those portraits and stuff, and I said I don't give away free brushes, but I teach how to create each one of them. So if I'm showing you how I'm sculpting, I'm going to open each one of the settings for that brush. You can screen capture, or you can follow it, and you can copy the settings, because I believe in, the only way to understand and to learn things is basically like by doing it, instead of like getting stuff basically like ready-made, right? So, but it's still, I created like a base mesh you guys can use if you want to. It's not perfect in any sense. I mean, like it needs topology reviews and stuff, but you can download from the page in the website. I'm going to be showing you some of that stuff. This one that's in here is like from my first class ever from last May, right? I created this character during the class, and I was just using it to test if Maya was rendering. Okay, so this was a rendering I was just doing here. Let's talk about the type of stuff that we're gonna be, let's see if I can just switch here. I'm gonna talk a little bit about the technical stuff. A lot of people ask me what's my machine, because I'm gonna be doing lots of those renders during the class, right? We're gonna, obviously like by area, we're gonna isolate an area and then refine it. Otherwise it's gonna take too long. But my machine looks pretty much like this. So I have basically like a 16 cores, 32 processors in my machine. So it's a fast machine, but it's not like a brand new machine by any means. So like it runs at 2.9 gigahertz, and it's like basically like 2 processors, each one running at 8 cores, right? And then for the memory, I have 96 gigs of RAM. It looks like a super powerful machine, but I told my previous groups, that this machine was bought for $1,000 from eBay. This machine is called a Z620. It's an HP Z620, and those machines nowadays, if you get one, if you copy those settings here and you just type this information on eBay and search for those machines, it's probably going for about $600 to $700 these days. It's a refurbished machine. Before I started the class, like that was like I think like a couple of months before I started the class, I bought this machine, and I mean, like we didn't have a lot of money, so I bought this machine refurbished, and it's been like a workhorse. It's like I work with it like 24/7. Work with it. It's on 24/7, but I work with them all the time. Rarely crashes like to the point that I cannot recover anything, right? Like there's normally like regular crashes from either Maya or ZBrush, but I'm gonna tell you that's the most stable machine I ever had, and it's pretty awesome. And this is my second refurbished machine I ever bought, and it's like I don't think about buying new machines anytime soon because they work great. The only thing I had to do is put a new graphics card, and that one I put a GTX 1070, which is not the newest, it's not the RTX or anything. So it's a decent machine. It's not anything super fancy, but it's a very decent machine. Again, for $1,000, you cannot go wrong with that. Let me start by showing some of those links in here first, just for you to be situated. And so the first one is going to be this one. Most of you already know, of course, but if you don't know, this is the group that my students use. So Fly Art Matters, right? Just for our students. This is important to say because I actually refuse every request from people who I cannot identify in the list of students. So in my online school, I check like name by name, and if it doesn't match, I just don't accept. So I understand that sometimes people use different names and stuff, so please let me know, send me a private message if you're here, it's like you were refused for any reason. But I normally try to check and just add people, it's like as I go. And then basically like my students since May of last year, they keep posting stuff and I keep commenting on it, that was not part of the original deal. I would not be doing this, but it's cool to have the sense of community. It's like the people are still working on their stuff, still struggling. And then it's every time I have some time, I just go there and I comment, like those ones I comment all today, and give you some tips about what can be improved, things like that. So you can join, and I just got like a Adam here, right? Adam's here, so we're gonna add you. Approve, right? And then yeah, so that's the first one. The second one I want you guys to check is this one. So this is the Instagram page of this user, Joe's Lockbauer. And this guy here is an amazing collector of live casts, right? I mentioned this if you watched the previous videos, but like I said, I have to talk about those things as if this was a single video that, just for people to have an idea about what's going on. What's cool about that is like live casts are very nice to see skin and skin variations. It's like from the secondary forms, primary forms, and tertiary forms as well. You're gonna see like lots of actresses and actors, right? So, since we are doing like a lot of people are doing celebrities, it's like it's very cool to see this kind of it's like representation without the texture, right? Like it's so deceiving. You're gonna see some people don't look anything like they look with the makeup. The makeup actually hides, it's like the pimples and things like that. So you see like, and there's the thing about the Photoshop, right? That people, if you have a picture in a magazine somewhere, it's like on the internet, you're gonna probably have some Photoshop done. So it's pretty cool to see the raw version of the people. And it's a very cool resource, and I really encourage you guys to follow him. He doesn't have a ton of followers. I think a lot of his followers actually I sent from my class. But his collection is pretty extensive. If you keep scrolling here, you're going to find like all kinds of actors and people, very famous people, So take a look. And this is a great way to look at this type of stuff, It's like, for example, like those big little craters in the face, There's a lot of very interesting stuff. The pictures are kind of like low resolution, but it's very cool to see like the general forms, because what happens a lot is that once we start like adding the tertiary forms, are going to be sculpting like one single pore, and then my students actually said Singapore, right? Single pore. And so, and then from that one, we're going to be reproducing, right? And creating all those those different pores, all, it's like, and basically like building the whole skin from scratch. But the thing that happens normally is that people just keep like the pores visible, and they forget to add like all the other stuff that makes the skin so interesting. which is like the micro wrinkles, the connection between the pores, how the skin stretches, the pimples, those little craters, it's like marks of scars and things like that. So it becomes really complex as soon as you start adding more and more layers of the skin. And it's very important to push to that point, since we're not going to be using any scans or texturing XYZ, which is an excellent product, by the way. But for the purpose of this class, I think it's more interesting to challenge ourselves and try to push as far as we can. And then obviously in the future, if you want to use a mix of both, it's like, or just use texturing XYZ, it's totally optional. But for the class, we're going to be learning how to do everything from scratch, because at some point we might need it. And also because if you accomplish at the end, it's like you can create something that looks realistic without using like photos or anything applied to the model, right? So I think it's a cool trip of going back to the old school way of doing things, basically. I try to emulate a little bit the traditional methods, but just apply to the computer. Obviously the computer is much easier because you have so much more control on things, especially when it comes like to the primary, secondary, tertiary forms, right? Like if you're a traditional sculptor, if you don't nail the primary forms from the get-go and you have like the eyes like completely apart, or it's like the distances are not correct, like distance between the eyes, the triangle that's forming, it's like a distance between eyes and the base of the nose, things like that. If you don't nail from the get-go and you start adding lots of secondary and tertiary forms, at the end it's not going to look like the person. It might look like a stylized version of the person, but not a realistic version. Now with CG, we have obviously this control, right? That we can, that's what's going to happen in this class. Actually, we're going to start with a model. I'm going to start with the sketch tonight, right? And then we're going to keep building things. But the thing is, like, since we're going to be using HD geometry, and I don't want you guys to sculpt everything twice, basically. So I'm going to try to save you some time by telling you, I know it's going to be hard, but you have to bear with me, to sculpt. So if you're going to sculpt the likeness, keep like symmetrical as it's like as long as you can until you get to the tertiary forms. Because what's going to happen is that once you get to HD geometry, if your model is symmetrical, you're going to be able to sculpt both sides at the same time. It's going to save you a ton of time. And that means like if you're sculpting pores, right? And it's like not one by one, but I would say like little arrays of pores, and a lot of them one by one as well. What's going to happen is that if you need to do twice that, it's going to drive you insane, So I would say like as soon as those pores are all in place, like the first pass, not like the fine details or micro wrinkles, but the first pass of the pores being in place, then I would say like go crazy, break the symmetry, do whatever you need to do to nail the likeness. But don't be impatient to the point like, okay, I cannot nail the likeness because I cannot break the symmetry. And that's really not doing it for me. Just be a little patient, because I'm just trying to save you time. Now, it's your option as well. If you feel like, okay, I don't mind sculpting things twice, then I say like, go for it, just break the symmetry early on and then just do it. But I can guarantee you it's going to save you a ton of time if you keep it symmetrical a little bit longer, The way I structure those classes is basically like the first hour, it's just me yapping my mouth like I'm doing now. So because I try to keep like my training of thoughts, like basically like, it's like going, and sometimes I'm doing something right here, like in exploring things. And so it's not like, it's kind of like I give you the basis of the whole thing, what's going to happen, right? And then the second hour, basically 45 minutes from now, then basically it's complete interaction and you guys can ask questions and we're going to explore stuff. As I mentioned before, I don't plan to hide anything. So what I tell my students normally is like, if there's anything you saw in my work, like in past works or whatever, and you still have questions about it, how you did this, how you how I create the specular here and blah, 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 then you can just ask me. And then if it's not going to interrupt like the flow of the class or something like that, I'm more than happy to just open the scene completely, explore it. Everything we're going to be looking at, for example, if I'm doing the skin, I'm going to start by plugging maps one by one, right? Like to have like a basic skin. But in terms of like how far I'm going to go exploring the final look of the skin, I'm going to go all the way in. So you can count that like all the way to the end of the class, there are at least like once or twice I'm going to be opening the entire shader network, which is quite simple if you consider what a lot of people do with skin shaders. I go for simplicity. I'm an artist much more than a technician, I believe. So I go for simplicity, and I try to keep things very simple and intuitive. So I'm going to be opening everything, every single setting for ZBrush brushes, skin shader, lighting setups, anything. And if I don't cover something, you can ask, and I'm going to be happy to just go back and cover that. So let's start by assembling our first scene here. So we are all in the same page. Let me just close this. I'm not going to save it. Let me just reopen my Maya. And so my ZBrush is open here. This is the model I did last month, not last month, that was October, right? And then the thing I can show you here is that this is the model without the HD. If you are not familiar with HD geometry, we're gonna do a lot of stuff with HD geometry during this class, so don't worry about it today. But just so you have an idea, my final model here has 1.1 million polygons, and that's it. And the reason why I do this, and again, I'm going to be, going back to this later, it's because if I subdivided once more, I would get to 4.4 million polygons, right? And we don't want to pass 2 million polygons. That's going to be like the ceiling for us if we are dealing with the HD geometry. Because what happens is that if you pass the 2 million points threshold, then basically what's going to happen is the map's going to take much longer to export. So HD geometry, basically what you do, you subdivide the model in a regular way up to 2 million polygons. And then if you hit the ceiling like this, 1.1, that means I cannot go further, right? So from this point on, instead of subdividing again, I go to Geometry HD here, and I subdivide by pressing this button as many times as I want. In this case here, this model got to, it has more polygons in here because I have a bunch of subtools, but the model is about 72 million polygons. And 72 million polygons includes the head, the trapezius here, and then there is a cap in the bottom that you don't need to have, by the way. It's up to you. I keep things all capped because I'm always afraid that some light's gonna leak, it's gonna create something. And also because I have the intention of 3D printing those things at some point, and I don't want to do the work twice, I want to have something that's water sealed, and then and so I can actually 3D print and also prevent like leaks, right? But it's up to you. If you want to save polygons, if you feel like it, you can remove those caps. Just going like very fast here, just have an idea about the way I do those things. I create a bunch of subtools in the way I normally do. So for example, this model here, since it's HD geometry, you don't see the HD geometry straight away. You have to generate like a preview or enter the HD mode. And to do that, you have to press A, right? So if I subdivided HD, like I mentioned before here, right, by using this button, and now I see the subdivision levels in there, that means now this model is HD geometry, but I cannot see the HD. Now, if I press A outside of the model, for example, if my mouse is around here and I press A, it's going to generate a preview. It's going to create like a quick render to show me what the HD looks like, right? So it looks like this. Now, if I click any place and start moving around, it goes away because that was just a preview, right? Now, if I want to actually enter HD, and by the way, this is just a preview of things. Don't worry too much, because I'm gonna go, a little bit deeper than that, a lot deeper than that later. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm just hide a couple of partitions or polygroups. It's for you to have an idea. And then, for example, if I need this, eye bags. So if I have a mask like this, normally if you press A right here in the middle, the tendency is ZBrush tries to create a circle around, because it makes a projection that goes like kind of like a cylinder, It goes across the model. So normally when I go HD, I go from the side. So I try to pick an area close to the nose in here. So if I press A right here, let's see, unsubdivided, like 493,000. Subdivided gave me 31.5 million polygons, right? You see like that my memory here for my ZBrush, I have basically like out of 96 gigs, I have a free memory here, 76 gigs, right? So that means it's not using a lot. So I would say like the first thing is that your machine, I expect you to have at least 32 gigs of RAM, right? Ideally, it would be 64. And then more than 64 is a little overkill because I normally don't go that far. You know, it's like my machine stays way below 96 gigs. But 32 would be the minimum, you know. So if you have less than that, I would encourage you guys to upgrade. And, you know, to work with HD is going to make your life much easier. But obviously only if you can, right? If you can, it's going to work fine. It's just, it might be a little bit more painful because it's going to have to work in smaller chunks. In this case here, I'm working 31.5, right? So now we are in HD, we can actually see that everything is in there, and I can actually go in sculpt. And the sculpt, like, it's pretty much like butter, right? Like ZBrush is very cool because everything is accelerated, like even for, you know, lower end machines, it's mostly like software accelerated. So all this stuff here was sculpted by hand, obviously, right? That's the kind of stuff we're gonna talk about. And then the interesting part is about transitions, right? Like how you make the transitions from different parts of the skin, you know? The skin looks different, it stretches in different ways, have different patterns in different parts of the face, right? You look at the nose, there's a different type of skin on the side of the nose, than the cheeks themselves, and then they make this transition into this very thin skin around the eye bags. And then you don't see any pores around here, all the way here, and then you start seeing them again. Right, so it's kind of like it's a cool study to see like how to transition from one area to the other one. And because we are not God, right, we don't know exactly what's going on. All we can do is actually explore and see the images and see how far we want to push. If you're making a portrait, a realistic portrait of someone with crayons, like on the paper, you can do something completely freeing and artistic, and create something that's very loose, right? Like it's more expressive without all the fine detail. Or you can go crazy and with like, you know, sharpen your crayon with a very thin point, and then start adding every single detail we can observe in the picture you're looking at, right? So it's all about how far you want to push this. I try to push as far as I can sell it. That's a realistic thing, but it's not going to be the most real model you ever seen because everything is done by hand, right? We're just humans trying to, you know, recreate something that we are seeing. So it's a matter of like how far you want to push this. I can tell you that some of my students push stuff like harder than I'm pushing right now. But it's really cool, you know. It's like to just explore those things and understand the structures of the skin. When you come like to the colors we're going to be painting, we're going to be taking considerations what the underneath structures are. You know, it's like if there's fat deposits in there, there's more of a yellow color. You know, it's like if there's a bone landmark, like the cheeks or something, you probably, or the cartilage of the nose. So we're going to be painting that area a little bit lighter, you know, it's yellowish, and try to capture those things. You know, it's like veins that's going to turn things a little bit more greenish blue. And you know, all kinds of stuff. Every time I sculpt or paint something like a texture, I try to remember how it looks like in the real world, right? Like what's going on with our human knowledge, like, you know, common sense stuff. You went to school, you know, it's like about blood vessels, about the fat that's underneath the skin and all this stuff, right? It's trying to apply at each step of the way. Basically, like, you know, if you're sculpting the eyelids, like, you know, it's like those eyelids, you see like they're kind of saggy, he's an older guy and everything. But it's not simply like sculpting the eyelid. You have to take in consideration, you know, it's like if you're sculpting this fold on top of the eyelid, you have to take in consideration that the eyelid's in the bottom of it, and it's pressing against it. So you're gonna have some areas that gonna bulge slightly, you know. So it's always taking in account like how physical things are in real life, and what if I could touch the model, you know. It's like, for example, like we are born to understand what a human face are, right? Like little babies, they can, you know, there are studies about like people like showing icons of like smile, you know, and anger and all this stuff, and the babies actually recognize those expressions like from the get-go almost, you know. So we are kind of hardwired to recognize other humans and expressions and things like that. So it's very hard to trick, right? But in clever ways, using clever ways, just like you know, it's like when you're sculpting the primary forms of the face, and you're gonna take in account like the zygomatic bone, and you know, it's like the brow ridge and things like that. And if you do that in the correct way, you create something that's believable in a way. We're gonna extrapolate that and try to do something similar with the main characteristics of the skin, right? So if you do enough, you should trick the eye to believe that that looks something like it can be realistic, right? I would not say real, but fairly realistic. And that goes back to the, you know, it's like how far you want to push it, right? But as artists, that's the fun part, is like, you know, how much fun you want to go and until we burn out, like looking at the same model forever, right? A couple of things I do in terms of like tricks. It's for example, like if I'm sculpting something for those classes, for example, I'm sculpting at night, and the classes start at 9 here now, all the way to 11. And bear in mind that that's after I dropped off the kids in school in the morning, went to a full day of work at the studio, and then come home, give some attention to my family, and then go back to this, you know. So I'm kind of burned out at the end of the day, but I keep pushing, you know. And so it's pretty obvious that sometimes I'm gonna get like some days that I'm a little bit off, and then to trick my brain so I can actually be able to see the model in a different way, I normally flip the model upside down, because you know, if you're doing drawings in the computer, you can actually flip horizontally, right? So you can see like things from a different angle. But in my case, if I'm burned out and I cannot, basically like your brain start telling you to go to sleep, you know, it's like everything becomes amazing. You know, it's like the model looks like a turd. And your brain is like, no, man, it looks amazing. Oh, you wait until you see this in the morning. And then you look in the morning, it looks like shit. But then a way to trick that is to actually, okay, brain, wait a second, let me just do this, you know, you just like go upside down like that. It's like, oh, that's a brand new model now. Then the brain's happy, right? Because like, okay, I can see things differently now. So you can keep going for a little while like this. You can sculpting things upside down, you know, and then your brain basically refreshes, you know, and you can actually milk some more juice in there. And then you go back to the same position, and all of a sudden, okay, I can see some more stuff now, right? Another trick I use is working more than one model at the same time. And if you're doing this, try to work in very different models. You're gonna learn a lot with it. It's impressive how much you learn. For example, if you're sculpting an older guy, if you have the opportunity of starting like a young woman, for example, right? You do that, or a young child, you know, it's like it's the hardest to sculpt, right? To get things right, because everything's so subtle. You can hide so much with all those wrinkles that I had my models here, but when it's a woman or a child, you know, it's like it's very hard to hide, because the forms have to be precise and on point, especially the primary forms, right? So that's a little preview about ZBrush here. We're gonna go back to it when we start sculpting, but let's go to Maya. And another thing I have to tell you guys is like I'm gonna be touching my nose a lot. It's pretty disgusting, but I have you know, it's like those allergies since I was a kid, and my nose is always itching, especially in the season right now with pollen. So don't think I'm sniffing any cocaine here, because I'm not. It's just like it's really, yeah, allergies kill me. So let's take a look. This is the brand new Maya here. It doesn't look any different from the previous one, I suppose, but apparently they have some more features in there. So let's take a look. Before we start, I got some emails from some of you guys saying that you know Maya, that you used like a long time ago, but you don't use right now. So what I try to tell people is that I'm going to be very, detail oriented when it comes to Maya, making sure that I open all the panels and show exactly where to find things. So you guys are not lost, right? It's important to have like a good idea about what's going on. You don't need to be a specialist in Maya. I work with Maya like since version 1, so like 20 years, I guess. But I still don't know a lot about it. So sometimes I get in trouble with it too, and especially because they keep like every new version, they keep changing position things. It's like let's reorganize and move the edit mesh to mesh, and then I was like, okay, now I cannot find anything, and then you go there, oh, there it is. So it's like there is this like thing, like it's constantly like this beta, right? It's a beta forever. So the first thing I'm going to be talking about in Maya is how to structure your folder so it's easier for you to work. Okay, so let me show you this. So I created this folder here, and I'm going to show you my subject for this month. You notice that I have like a portrait of my wife that I did in July. There is a Stan Winston I did in May. And then Harryhausen I did in June. So like 2 old white dudes. There's my wife, which is also white, right? And then I got some social justice warriors there, like, coming after me and saying like, we need more variety. It was like, okay, so I did the Native American. And my intention is to actually be very inclusive because it's important as a sculptor, it's like to add more variation, of course. So I want to do like children as well. And then, so for this month, I'm going to be exploring some darker skin, right? So I'm going to be picking one of those African tribes. And then I just like look at some of the images, and some are so striking. I love the scarring, in some of those tribes, the way that they do it is so beautiful. And also the strong features, some of them are mostly like for the skin tone I might go for. Some are for like the type of skin, some are like the bone structure. But like I did with my Native American guy, I'm not going to be locked to one of those. I rather use a lot of those references and create my own. And but obviously it's hard in a way, because like although all of those characters have very dark skin, they have very different facial structures and bone structures. It would be very racist of me to pretend they're all the same, because they're not. They're completely different people. And just the same, like if you look at the skull of like an Aboriginal from Australia, it's like it's a very different skull structure. And also some Indians or even Japanese, it's like I had friends, it's like with very, very dark skin. So one thing that I have to disclaim about the dark skin is that we discussed this, I think was in the class of June, is that it's a hard thing to do in a way when it comes to the subsurface scattering. Because we found some scientific papers when you're looking at it. And what happens is that there's a difference between the natural melanin in the skin, that's like tons of melanin that creates like the darkness of the skin, or something that's actually sunburn. They're different things, right? So if you have the natural melanin in there, the scatter is going to happen in a certain way, because the light's going to actually penetrate the skin. It's like maybe not as much as the lighter skin, but it's going to penetrate the skin deeper, while the like a sunburn skin, for example, it can look just as dark as this skin, but because it's sunburned, maybe like, I don't know if it creates a little crust at the it's like at the surface or whatever it happens. It's just like it doesn't have the same penetration, it's like of the subsurface scattering. So it's a tricky one to do, especially like considering, for example, like a lot of those tribes, it's a combination of both. Oh, this guy here is the only white dude that made my list. It's just because his facial structure is so awesome. I might use this guy for some other work in the future. I don't know. I was just collecting those pictures, and he popped in there. I was like, oh, I'm going to collect you too. But look at those scars, man. It's so awesome. And the facial structure too, it's like the nose structure in here, how flat it looks in there. There's a book I want you guys to take a look. If you can buy, please buy this book. I'm not sponsored by any means. It's called Anatomy of Facial Expression by Uldis Zarins. And it's basically like it's a complete, study of the human face, facial expressions, all kinds of stuff. And he goes, there is a section at page 32 that he talks about the skull, and he shows like the European, African, East Asian, and Australian skulls, and how different they are in terms of the depth. It's like how the eyes are a little bit more flat in certain skulls, how the teeth area is more pronounced. If you get like those replica bones from Bone Clones, it's a website you can buy replicas of resin, made out of resin. You can also find like the same kind of stuff, like an African skull, East Asian, and they are very different skulls, all the same species, but we are different, and since we're going to be doing an Africa person, we're going to be looking at the African skull quite a lot, keeping that in mind that the tribes and the countries, they have very different facial structures, So at the end, I'm going to try to produce something that's believable, but it's not locked into like a tribe or a country. It's like, let's create a fictitious character that looks believable, basically. My main intention is to explore the color of the skin and try to come up with something that's interesting, So that's going to be my trip for this one. Also, the eyes, those are going to be the darkest I've worked so far, which is very interesting. I love the dark eyes. Mine are not as dark as those ones, a little bit lighter, but my eyes are pretty dark too, as a Brazilian Latino. So that's going to be very interesting. I was like, and at the end, if you have like those bundles that I have in the website, you're going to be able to, have a collection of different types of skin and how I approach those, in my own way, obviously, probably not the best or, but definitely something that can be helpful for you. In terms of the specularity of the skin, it's very interesting, right? Because if you do this same level of specularity with like a white person, probably is going to look a little bit, it's almost like you don't have enough specs. Sometimes you have to crank a little bit more. And it's because the skin tone is so dark, it ends up like showing much more speck, So that's going to be another thing that we're going to be talking about. Also, this is like a picture taken in a studio. So that means that the lights being used here, they are probably using like very large soft boxes. And when you have large soft boxes, you're going to get like some very soft shadows, right? Underneath the skin and things like that. This is like natural light, but it's also very broad because it's based on the sky, right? So you have like this you don't have like super sharp lines, right? You have like this soft, so it's probably like, I don't know, like maybe like in a shade, right? It's just like a bright day, but maybe in the shade. This one is a little bit more, you can see the sharp line in there. So that's kind of like maybe like a sunny day. And this again, like probably like very, very large soft boxes, or maybe like a natural light, right? Which basically like that's what they use the large soft boxes for, right? They're trying to simulate like a natural window light. So that's why they use that. It's kind of like having a portable window you can just put in the studio. So that's why they are large, to create this kind of like softness in the shadows, right? Same for this guy, right? You don't see anything like a sharp shadow under the nose. Everything is very soft and diffuse. So, that works for creating like a beauty shot of the person, right? Without like harsh lines or things like that. So that's going to be basically like my baseline to start with. And the character might develop into something completely different, just like what happened with my Native American guy. It might start based on a single reference that I like the best. And then all of a sudden, like, I was like, you know what? I think the other guy, this guy looks more interesting to me when it comes to the sculptural, aspects. And then I might just like switch altogether. So that's basically like what I have for my picks for now. So you see, like I have my folder here called, I have my hard drive and then Chris, personal projects. And then I create this one, African tribes. And then I have this folder, which has just one folder inside, which is called references, right? So I'm going to be creating a whole structure here, starting with Maya. So the first thing I did, I started Maya, right? And before I start doing any work, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to File, And I'm gonna go to set project. I can do that. And then I can just say, let's see, African tribes. And I can just say set, right? So when I say set here, it's gonna ask me, select another location or create the default workspace. I create the default workspace. So I'm gonna click that one, right? So let's go back here. And you notice when I do this, it created like this little file in here, which says like, okay, it says like, okay, this is the default workspace for Maya now. But it's not creating any folders for me. And I want Maya to create the folders so I can keep everything organized. So let's go back in here. And then, I mean, like this way it would work for you already. But to make things more organized, you can do this instead. So you go to File, and you go to Project window instead. And then here I have already the current project, African tribes, and then personal projects, right? And then you see like Maya gives all those names for the folders by default. You can change if you want, but I wouldn't. I would just like get used to the names and use them. So if I click accept, before let's bring this up so you can see what happens. So you see like I only have references and this little file inside. So if I go here and I just say accept, so let's go back in there. Now it created all those folders for me, right? So it has scenes where I'm going to be saving all my Maya scenes. Movies, if I want to save like turntables and stuff, right? And then other than that, other than having a folder that I created by myself, which is called references, right? So Maya did everything else. I'm going to create another 2 folders in here. The first one is going to be called OBJ. And the second one is going to be called ZBrush. People, you know, create ZBrush and then nested inside of ZBrush, they create like OBJ in there. It doesn't matter. It's up to you. What are we going to be using this for? All my ZBrush files, which I'm going to be saving as projects, going to go inside of this folder. Everything I exported from Maya to ZBrush and from ZBrush to Maya as OBJs are going to put inside of OBJs. So you're going to keep organized. So because we already created this default workspace in here, now every time you click the open scene, I'm gonna go straight to the scenes folder, right? You can look for the scenes in there. Obviously you can navigate if you're saving a different spot, but that's basically what it's gonna look at. Source images is gonna be where you're gonna save all your textures. So it's gonna be under source images. By default, Maya always looks for textures in there. So if you're moving this to another computer or to another hard drive and stuff, it's more likely that Maya is not gonna be missing files, like looking for stuff randomly if you're saving different hard drives. It's gonna look for stuff as long as you set up the you know, the environment to this folder here, to the main folder. Maya should look for the textures inside of source images. So that's gonna be it. A couple of things we can look here as well. It's that it's just a preference, obviously, but like under window, so there's this Windows, there's workspaces, and then there is this last option here that's called disable docking and undocking. What happens is that this drives me nuts sometimes because by accident I end up like dropping stuff and then it changes all my interface. So for example, like if I have Arnold, the render view, and I'm moving it around, you're gonna try to dock in there, look. So it docked in there, and now I don't like it, right? So let's just bring it back here. So the thing that I do, I normally go to Windows workspaces and I just click disable that because I don't like it. And then all of a sudden I can actually move stuff around without docking stuff, you know? Otherwise, like every one of those tabs you move around is gonna try to dock, like it's gonna create a mess, you know? So that's one thing. When it comes to preferences for Maya, there are like a couple of places where you can find the preferences. One of them is inside of Window, and then Settings and Preferences, and then Preferences, right? You can access from here. And then the other one, you're gonna see there's this little guy running right there with the little gear. So if you click that one, you're gonna go to the same spot. So here, obviously, I mean, like I'm in United States now. I was raised in Brazil. We have metric system in Brazil. And so it was a little weird for me to switch to inches, and but I got used to it. So at this point, the first thing I do normally when I come to Maya, I go to settings. So you see, like in the preferences, you go all the way to settings, and you can either keep the way you have it in there. We're going to be talking about the two of them, metric and also inches. But I'm going to keep working on inches. So you see like that my grid in here is going to change. So like if I put millimeter, it's a tiny little grid in there, centimeter, like that, and then inch, right? It looks like that. So each one of those squares represents 1 inch. The other thing we're going to be looking here, let's see if I remember, files and projects, files, references, let's see, color management. So for color management in here, you're going to check like what's this color space you're going to be using. Some people prefer different ones, right? I'm going to be using just like the regular sRGB right now. My monitors are calibrated for it, but some people rather use like ACEs and stuff like that. But it's really up to you. So in this case here, what I'm going to be doing, I can create like different rules in here, which is very important if you are trying to automate stuff. It's like if you're creating and bringing textures into Maya from ZBrush, you want to make sure that it assigns the right color spaces. When it comes like to RGB maps, which is basically like like a color maps, for example, color map is going to be just RGB color. But then if you have floating point, for example, like displacement maps, or for example, HDRI maps, either one are RGB for those spaces. You want raw, because otherwise it's not going to be represented correctly. In the same way, if you try to assign raw, for example, for a color space that was created in RGB, you're probably going to have some distortion. The color is not going to look correct either. So my rules that I created here, you can add more if you want. Every time I bring a TIFF, it assigns for me the color space as RGB. Every time I bring a TX, like a texture, which is basically Arnold default, it's raw. HDRs are raw, EXRs are raw. EXR is how we're going to bring both certain types of HDRI maps and also displacement maps from ZBrush. We're going to be exporting everything in 32 bits EXRs. So it's important to set it to raw. You don't need to do this because you can set things manually, like when you bring each one of the textures, but this is going to automate things for you. It might be a little bit easier that way. Just don't forget that after you changed everything in here, you changed your settings, like, put inches, whatever, just save it, right? And then once you save, everything should be good. Now, what happens as well with Maya is that if Maya crashes right here, all this stuff I just did is going to be lost. Like my project that we set the project in there, right? All that stuff, it's going to be lost. So I'm going to do just like as a prevention, I'm going to just close my Maya. I can actually even save the scene just as a test. So save as, and then it's going to go straight to that scene. And I'm going to be like initial scene or anything you want to call. And I'm going to put the number, and then I save normally in binary because the files are much faster to load and much smaller as well. But if you want to save in ASCII, you can do that. The only advantage with ASCII is that if the file gets corrupted and if you know what you're doing, you might be able to actually remove a couple of lines or things in there and try to fix the file manually. While the binary is basically compiled, you cannot do that, right? But it's like I don't know much about like how to fix files anyway, so I prefer like to save multiple versions of the binary and just get done with it. So I'm gonna save it, and then I'm gonna close my Maya, just as a prevention here, just like as the first step. After that, you don't need to do this. But just make sure that all the the settings I saved and everything, they are saved within Maya. It saves in the environment and all this stuff. So let's just take a look if everything is correct. So first test I can do here just to check if things were saved correctly. Takes a little bit to load because it has to load Arnold, and Arnold now it's Arnold 6. which is supposed to have a lot of improvements with the GPU acceleration. I'm still having trouble with it. I still use CPU, but eventually going to get it sorted out. So the first test I'm going to do, I'm going to click this open here, this little box. And then sure enough, it went straight to scenes, right? So that means that it worked. So from this point on, it always going to point to that folder, unless my environment gets corrupted. So the other thing we're going to be doing is just like setting up like a very initial, like, you know, bare bones scene here. If you click in this little box in here with the little gear, not this one here, but this one, that's the preference for your render, like all the settings, right? And you're going to notice that if you didn't set up the project like we did initially, this is going to be pointing to some random location, right? But because you did it correctly, now it points to the correct folder, which is like African tribes images. So anything we save in here, going to go straight to that folder. So I'm going to start with the file name here. African portrait. And then that's basically like I gave that a name. And then so if I start with like A, for example, I can do iterations like B, C, D, or whatever, right? So I can do that. And then here I'm gonna be telling Maya to render like multiple frames. Not like we're gonna be rendering multiple frames all the time, but I like to do this because this way, if I wanna render stuff later on, I can actually set up like different camera angles in a sequence and then just tell Maya to render that sequence overnight. And then in the morning I have all my renders, you know, for example, if I set up like the frame 1 to be profile, frame 2 to be the front view, top view, whatever view you choose, you know, different camera angles, lenses angles, types of lenses. And then basically like Maya renders the whole sequence for you in a single scoop, right? So that's why it's important to set it up now. So you see by default in here, so the color space I'm not going to change. I'm going to just change this single frame here to this guy here. So name, the number of the frame, like the frame number, and then the extension, right? So when I click that, it shows me a preview in here. So if I render like from 1 to 10, that's how it's going to be called. So the prefix, then the frame number, and then the extension, the XR, right? It's set to 10 frames here, but obviously if you render like more than that, you can actually change it 20, whatever you want to do. I normally use like between 10 and 15 angles, so it doesn't take too long to render. And then for the resolution I use, I normally do this. I normally use either 900 by 900. If I try to type 900, it's going to change again here because it says, oh, it's not going to change. It says this one is off. By default, it's normally on. So if I type 900, it should be okay. But if I had this one on here, then if I try to type anything else, it's going to change the first one because it's proportional, right? So I'm going to keep it off, and then I'm going to just type 900 by 900. Or sometimes I do 1200 by 1200, depending on, you know, if it's a little bit more like a final image or not. And this resolution is what works the best for me to post on Instagram. That's why I keep, you know, doing square renders. So I'm going to do 900 by 900 instead. So it goes faster. And that's basically it for this first tab. You see like common tab. It has my Arnold render in there. I already gave a name. We already have the project set up. And, you know, the frame number, perspective, and then the resolution. And that's it. So for the second tab, by default, that's basically what Arnold uses for the anti-alias, right? So what I do normally here, I crank those numbers to 3 instead of 2, because this is the multiplier. It's going to multiply, I believe, this one by the other ones, and I'm going to give you the number of samples total. And then for basic stuff, I start with 6, right? So it gives me like 1260 here for the max samples in there. So that's basically what I do. Otherwise, it gets too noisy. You know, you can always use like less if you want. But then for final images, if you're rendering like kind of like a low resolution, I would crank this one. Sometimes I go as far as like 14, you know. So I would say like 8 would be kind of like most of my renders I post on Instagram, even like the finer stuff. But then sometimes I go like, if I want something super refined, I go like to 10, 12, 14, you know. So let's start with 6. Keep this one like that. I don't touch the clamping here. You can if you want. You can take a look at the manual. I can point you to the manual if it's interesting for you. In the manual, they mention like that all those algorithms to create like the types of anti-alias in there, they are they have like different results. Some are sharper than the other ones and everything. But they also say that the Gaussian actually can, if you change this number here, it can create like sharper images or not. By default, it uses 2. So if you want something a little sharper, you can go up to 1.5, for example. If you want even sharper, go to 1.2. But then it starts getting too sharpened, you know, and then the image doesn't look that good. If you want something more natural, I would say like, I don't know, 1.6, something like that. For advanced in here, I'm gonna click this use auto bump only if I'm rendering to really see how the skin is gonna look at the end, right? Because you see there's a warning in there. It says like, if you check this one, it's gonna really you know, impact the render time. What the auto bump does in a nutshell is this. So if you bring a displacement map from ZBrush and you assign to your model, and you have like lots of super fine, crisp, oh, it's time. Just a second, I'm gonna open for you guys to ask any questions. So if you bring something from ZBrush, you sculpted all this beautiful detail in HD, and all of a sudden you're not seeing the subsurface scattering penetrating those pores, you know? They're kind of like not completely calculating the whole thing. It's because of, they're kind of like stopping before the auto bump. The auto bump, what it is that Arnold is smart enough, for example, if you bring a model that to get to the final resolution, like my model in ZBrush right now has 72 million polygons dimension, right? And then in order for Arnold to calculate that, either you subdivide this model many, many times until you get to that resolution, or you like obviously at render time, what you can do, you can actually use less subdivisions. So for example, instead of like using 5, use 3, and then you click use auto bump. So basically what Arnold does is it switches, sorry, it basically like it renders everything up to a certain point with the displacement map. So it's going to displace, let's say, like 3 different levels, right? And then after the 3rd level, it's going to shift the displacement map into a bump map. It's going to transform into a bump map. So for all intents and purposes, it's going to look, you know, pretty awesome at the end, but it's actually not subdividing the mesh further. But obviously, if you want a precise results, I would say like go further than the 3 subdivision levels, right? Then you're going to use like, for example, 4 or 5 subdivision levels to get like super crisp details and the pores and everything. But to have like the perfect calculation of that when it comes to the skin itself, you have to use this auto bump in subsurface scattering. Otherwise, it's not going to scatter inside of the pores, right? So you guys have any questions? I mean, like I'm just yapping here, but yeah, you can ask, and I'm going to keep, during the breaks, I'm going to be talking about the rest of the stuff.
Hi, Chris, can you hear me?
Hi, Thiago.
Hey, man. Yeah, I was wondering when you mentioned about the poly count, that you go as far as whatever poly count it is, so HD doesn't blow up the computer. How do you deal with that if you need a sculpt like a full body character, or you know, a shirtless full body character, or anything that has more than the head? Do you separate the stuff on the high geo, or how do you do it?
That's a good question. I mean, like it's all a matter of how you're gonna plan your model, right? You mentioned like a shirtless guy, for example. If it's not a completely naked guy, you can get away of like basically like subdividing the upper body, right? So I mean, like at the studio, what we do, we have something called partitions, right? So we actually partition the model in basically separating different models, and then we can go HD in each one of those chunks, and then assemble everything at the end. But I try to keep everything in a single model. And it's all a matter of like how you're gonna plan your model. There's a Hellboy model where I started doing like the whole body, my plan is to do like the fine detail in everything, right? And when I did that, I planned the model to have a certain number of polygons. I'm going to be talking about that as well. Have a certain number of polygons that most of the concentration of the polygons are in the hands. They're going to be more visible when it comes like to, you know, detail in the hands, and the face as well. And then the rest, for example, if you can get away with certain areas, for example, the chest not having like that many, you know, polygons, you can actually do that. And then I believe when I subdivided it, the entire body gave me about 250 million polygons, which is really good, you know, because if you consider just the face, what I'm sculpting right now, 31 million polygons, and I'm getting the entire face. That's basically like to get like 250 million, you're gonna get like what, like yeah, almost like I don't know, like 9 times that. So that means you're gonna have to enter in and out HD about 9 times to cover the entire body to be able to sculpt everything. But it's totally doable, man. Like HD geometry can afford to have like up to 1 billion polygons in theory, but I don't think I ever did a model that passed 250 million. Even at work, I did like when I sculpted those giant eels that fly on the first Avengers movie, you know, like those eels.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had to sculpt the bodies for them, and I think I reached like about 230 million polygons. So I could do like fine detail and stuff, but without like being completely insane. And that was like many versions ago. It was like before the ZBrush even went HD, you know, not HD, 64 bits. Now that 64, you see, like I can sculpt like up to 45 million polygons in one chunk. So it's pretty awesome, you know. It's like in the past you would have like just a limit of 9 million polygons, so you would sculpt just like little circles, and now you can sculpt like huge chunks of the body. So you can definitely.
So you pretty much like you divide the body up in smaller subtools. That's pretty much it, right? So you're gonna.
No, I actually keep everything in a single subtool.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I thought you separated it and then kind of subdivide just the arm and then put it all back together on the mesh in Maya.
No, that's what we do at work basically. My personal workflow, I try to keep everything together because that way I don't need to worry about seams, you know. It's like otherwise at work normally people are gonna have to remove seams and that takes more time, and I try to keep everything in a single mesh, you know. So that's what I'm saying, like 250 million in one mesh basically.
Okay, so you did that at work. Sometimes you do partition. You mentioned the you know, sometimes because when I see you sculpting in HD, the circle ZBrush opens, it's very big, but on my computer for some reason it's very small.
Oh, it's gonna depend on how your model is planned, right? So if you have like a denser model in the base mesh, then obviously when you subdivide HD, it's not going to reach that same amount of polygons. You know, it's like it's not going to cover the same area. For example, if you had like double the resolution of your mesh, like let me just show you like in the base mesh in here. Let me just go back for a second. It's recalculating. So I'm going to go back to the lowest. So my lowest looks like this. It's pretty low, right? So let's say like you have like double the resolution of my mesh in here, and you're trying to reach like a similar number, for example, 72 million polygons. At that point, you're probably gonna get like, if you have double the resolution of what I have in here, you're probably gonna have half as many polygons covered when you go to HD, you know. It's just a matter of like how you're gonna subdivide it, and how you're planning your polygroups as well, right? My polygroups are planned like this. You can plan in any way you want, but I mean, like I really want this mask here to be the main mask. So when I go HD, I know that's gonna cover the entire thing. And how do I know that? So let's do a little testing here, for example. I mentioned this a couple of times in the past classes, but again, like let's pretend this is all fresh. So for example, I have like, just for this chunk here, the face and the shoulders, or the front of the, you know, this area here. So I have 78, 71 polygons. That means like it's probably not completely symmetrical, otherwise it would have like a round number. So there's one spot that's missing one poly selected, but it doesn't matter. So let's just say that's the amount of polygons I have in my base mesh. So let's just do this. And it's just gonna go, let's see, until I can see the number in there. Okay, 78, 71. So let's do a calculator here. So the way I plan my model, instead of doing that, let's consider the entire model here so you can see what I mean. So if I have the entire model like this, I have 17,328 polygons. This is not like an accident. I didn't do that by accident. What I normally do, I try to calculate an optimal number for my model to have when it comes to HD, right? And the way I do this, for example, if my model here has 72 million polygons, including the bottom in here and everything else, that means that you can either use a similar resolution of what I have, or you can increase a little bit to get a little bit more room for a little bit more detail. So let's say like you want to plan a model that at the end, when you have like a bust like this, you want to have something, let's say 85 million polygons. So you're going to do 85 million polygons in here, right? So that's the number. So you want this in HD geometry. So how you get like to know what's how many polygons you need in your base mesh? By dividing by 4 a bunch of times, right? So I'm going to divide by 4 one time, divide by 4 again, divide by 4, divide by 4. So either your base mesh is going to have 332,000 polys, or divided by 4, you're going to have 83,000 polys, or you're going to have 20,750, right? That's basically like a very optimal number. If you consider my model in there, I have like 17,000, right, for my base mesh. So if you have, instead of 17,328, you have something closer to 2,751. That means like if you do the opposite now, right? So you start with that number, you're gonna times 4, oops, times 4, times 4, times 4, times 4, times 4. That's it, right? So you're basically gonna have like a, let's see, divided by 4, oops, divided by 4, divided by 4. So that number in here is gonna be our optimal resolution before you go HD. Because like I said before, if I hit like more than 2 million polygons, then it's not gonna work for exporting the displacement maps. So if you start with that number I mentioned, at some point you're gonna hit like this number of subdivision levels, which you can, actually we can see how many is gonna be here. Again, so if you start with this number for your base mesh, 20,000 polygons, 751, you're gonna have to subdivide 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. Subdivide 3 times in regular subdivision, you're gonna get to this number, and then you're gonna subdivide HD geometry now. So HD geometry, you're gonna subdivide another 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. So at the end, you have like a total of 6 subdivision levels, 3 non-HD, 3 HD to get to that number. So that's how you plan it, you know. That way you can actually get really close to the optimal number you want to use. So if you start off like 85, you want 100 million polygons for something like that in HD, you do the same thing, you know, same process, divided by 4, until you reach that number. So it's very easy to calculate. And then later on tomorrow, we probably can explore how to calculate the number of UDIMs to be able to accommodate 85 million polygons. It's another process you have to do. Cool. I normally go overkill, you know, it's like I use more UDIMs that I actually need, but it's just because I want to have some room, you know. And some people like that as well, if you want to use like Mari later on to paint stuff by hand, you know, so you can actually do that. But yeah.
Cool. You pretty much plan yourself ahead and hit the poly count you need.
Yes, that's very important, man. Like to really nail the, you know, it's like the topology as well. If you're gonna go for animation, you're probably gonna need a better flow than I have in here. My flow is just good enough for, you know, for portraits and stuff, but it's not planned for like animation. It probably would hold up for a lot of stuff, but not perfect at all. And you see, for example, like in this corner here, those mesh, this area here is much more spread out. My polygons are much bigger, but it's the kind of stuff, you know, it's like this area is not even that important. I want to get like most of the detail in those areas, you know, it's like nose and the cheeks and around here. So for example, those ears are overkill. I could actually redo the topology here to have less topology in the ears and probably add some more to the face. It's all a matter of like how we're gonna do it. Because I mean, like if I subdivide HD, right, you're gonna get a ton of possibility for detail in here and not so much in here, but you know, it's still pretty good. So yeah.
Right. Cool. Thank you, man.
No problem.
Hi, Chris.
Hey.
This is Enrique. How are you?
Hi. How's it going, man?
Good, good. How are you?
Great.
Nice to meet you finally.
You too.
I have a question regarding the symmetry that you talk about. And I was wondering, because it is true that it's very hard to get the likeness right if you don't break the symmetry, right? Like
yes.
that is very frustrating when you're dealing with likenesses. So my question is it possible maybe, or would you do an approach that is maybe creating that asymmetry and then blend shape the mode in a layer to kind of that, you cannot work with HD with layers, right?
No, you can't.
That's one of the,
but you can use morph targets. Yeah.
You can use morph targets. Okay.
Yeah. You can always use a morph target, save it, right? Like save in your hard drive, export an OBJ, and then have that in the buffer. And then you can, you know, it's like the way I normally tell people is like, okay, keep symmetrical. But then if you want to have like an asymmetrical version, just for you to check and sculpt like the asymmetry, it's totally fine. As long as every time you're going to go to HD to sculpt the fine detail, you re-import your symmetrical version just so you can actually keep going with it. But it doesn't stop you from having, for example, like multiple versions. You can export your hard drive and then import it on demand.
I guess it will be only like a matter of keeping the same UVs, right? Like you just keep the same UVs and then you just do the same thing. And then the displacement you apply, like the shift of the detail is not going to be.
Yeah, if it's not like drastic, it's going to be fine. But then if it's something that like you pushed really hard, for example, like if you're moving stuff around, you have to make sure you use like a large brush, right? Like to move stuff like kind of like uniformly with like with a nice fade, you know. Otherwise, you can really mess up with stuff, and you know, you're gonna have to resculpt a little bit more, but shouldn't be a big deal, you know.
Okay. Yeah. And that is actually related to the next question. That is like, if you are adding detail to an already face with an expression, right? Let's say like the ones I have been working like very smile or like laughing or like yelling or something. Would you actually create that detail or a first pass of that detail, as you said, like the pores and everything in default, and then stretch it to see the result, the natural result of the stretch pore? Or would you actually sculpt the pores or apply the pores when it's already in that extreme pose?
I would say like if you're planning for animation, I would sculpt in the default for sure, you know, and then deal with any overstretching. I would deal like with the, you know, blend shapes or something like that I can correct, or maybe like some blending of the displacement maps to correct certain things. But if I'm sculpting stuff on pose already, I try to sculpt the stuff like, you know, approach it like if it was like a clay sculpture, you know, you have that pose already baked in there. And then it's a matter of like finding references to see what area is going to stretch and what the directions the wrinkle is going to be created, and try to emulate that basically, but without using a neutral, you know. But it's totally up to you. If you feel like you're going to get like a better result, and you should, because, you know, if you do the stretching in a very natural way, you know, kind of like, again, like with the big brush that can actually, you know, push stuff just enough before it breaks, right? Then, I mean, it's up to you, but
cool.
I think in my case, it would be a little bit overkill, I think, you know. It's like I would go for something like, okay, let me observe and try to sculpt those, you know.
Okay.
Yeah. Right.
And then I have many other questions, but I guess I will leave some time for the other people.
Okay, no problem.
So yeah, when we get to the eye, I have questions for the eye.
Oh, no, we're going to get to a lot of stuff.
So yeah, just related to what you have said already. So
okay,
cool.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So for now, I'm just going to keep going here with some of the other settings, but you guys just like feel free to stop me but you know, just like so we can finish those little tabs in here just for the settings. Also the ray depth in here, what it means is that it's how many walls the rays coming from a light are going to have to pass to be able to illuminate something. For example, like if you have your eyeball, right? And then the way you're going to construct the eyeball is going to be like in 3 pieces, basically. So you're going to have the outer shell, and then we're going to have the iris that's going to be just a disc, and we're going to have a little pupil in there. And then sometimes, I mean, like I tried in the past, and I had like mixed results, having kind of like a bubble with liquid covering the cornea. We can try that as well. So you just have to bear in mind that every time you add an object, for example, like you have a sphere, you have basically 2 walls. It has to hit the front wall and the back wall, right? So you're going to need like 2 bounces in there. And so basically, like you have to have enough depth to pass all those layers, depending on how many objects you're going to be creating with transparency, right? So just to make sure that I hit all those things, I mean, like I normally use like 6. You know, it's like you can use like more than that. You can put like all 10 if you want. But, you know, it's like you can do 6 or 10, whatever you're going to do, whatever, you know, works, 10. And then for environment here, we're not going to be talking about it because that's basically like adding atmospherical effects that, you know, I use this for, you know, if I'm doing like an environment or something like that, but not in this case, unless you want to do kind of like a smoky atmosphere, you know, with the light coming from the window stuff. But you can create that with the atmosphere. But let's take a look at this as well. Textures. So textures in here by default, there is a way that back in the day, Mental Ray had this. It has to actually, if you have like a very big texture, it breaks it up like in tiny little chunks, so it can actually render, even though you don't have a lot of memory on your computer, you can actually break in tiny chunks and load one by one. And that way it's more effective if you don't have enough memory. And I believe that Arnold does a similar thing with the TX files, but because I have the 96 gigs here, I normally turn everything off. So I'm gonna leave it optional to you guys. If you don't have enough memory, maybe you can use that. But I'm just gonna tell you, you know, beforehand that if you do keep this one on, you're gonna have to make sure you reload your textures at all times. Otherwise, it's not gonna recognize if you do any changes. It's gonna basically just load the, you know, the one you had in memory. It's not going to load the new one. For example, it's not going to convert a new one unless you tell Arnold to do so. So I'm going to turn this one off and use existing. I'm going to turn it off as well. But again, like if you want to use, if you don't have a lot of memory, you can turn this one on. Subdivision, I'm not going to touch in here. It has a weird number, 231 max subdivisions, which is basically like we're never going to get there, I guess. It wouldn't make a difference if you did like 16 here, for example. It would be basically the same thing, I believe. I never noticed anything. And then for the last tab we're going to be talking about here is the system.
Sorry, Chris.
Yeah.
One question about the thing that you just said about the textures,
Yeah.
that they are Arnold reuses them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is that similar to caching the textures in V-Ray? Is that going to save render time?
Yeah, I believe it is. I believe it keeps those cached, unless, for example, like if you're doing lots of iterations, right? Like you're painting like multiple iterations of the same texture, like in the same night, and you forget to tell Arnold to reload those textures, it's always going to be it's going to have those ones in cache, and always going to try to use those ones, you know. So you just have to remember to actually reload things. I can show you guys where to do that.
So this, for instance, would be very useful to keep it on if you're doing just look dev, right? If you are just like
exactly, you're done with the textures. Yeah, you're done with the textures. Already loaded them, and now you're just working with the lighting. Then definitely I would keep this one. So basically, like it loads one time and then keeps in there, you know.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yep. Thank you, man.
Mm-hmm. Chris.
Yeah.
On this TX thing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're doing the look dev like you guys just mentioned, and you're playing with the levels inside Arnold, it's not creating new TX, right? That's what it is.
Arnold, anytime you have this one on auto convert, if you bring like a TIFF or an EXR from another program, Arnold's gonna try to convert to TX. If you assign, for example, like if you have your shader network and you assign a new texture in there, like a RGB texture, Arnold automatically is going to try to convert it to TX. And then once it's converted to TX and it's already in the folder, it's not going to do it again. So basically, like if you bring another, if you save a new version of that, oh, there's an echo. I'm just going to mute you just for a second here.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
Nice to meet you.
Hi,
Do you hear
man.
me? Do you hear me?
I'm just gonna finish replying to him here, just a second, and then I go back right to it. So yeah, so was it? Oh, I lost my train of thought. What I was saying about the TX again. Just remind me for a second.
You're saying that Maya creates a new TX for every text.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So for example, like you did like you painted one texture, and then you let Arnold convert to TX automatically. But then you went back to ZBrush and you noticed like, okay, I can improve this one. I'm gonna export a new set, and you export back. If you even if you save again on top of the same EXR or TIFF, the original file, Arnold's not gonna convert the texture again. Basically, like you're gonna have to tell Arnold to actually reconvert that texture. And the way you do this, you can come here to Arnold tab, and there's a bunch of utilities here, and then there's and then there's the TX manager here you can do it, and then there's the update TX files. So this one here is going to show everything that's loaded with TX, and this one here is going to actually reload the whole thing. So you have to make sure that you're doing this at all times if you're doing multiple iterations, you know. Otherwise, it's not going to do it automatically.
But what if you're just tweaking the levels inside the shader? Arnold doesn't create new TXs, right? Every time.
No. If you're just like, let's say, like you created a node just for color correction, and now you're basically like you're feeding the TX into this node. It should be completely fine. You should be able to just work with the TX. Now, if you change the texture, you have to actually generate a new TX or load the file without the TX, right? Like just a EXR, and then make sure you load in the same node so it's already connected to the color correction nodes, you know?
Okay, cool. Thank you, man.
And your TX color settings are raw, right?
The TX are, the TX I have in there, I believe they are raw. I think they are raw, but I don't think I'm using them.
I think you said raw, but yeah, I was a little, because you don't use them, you use the TIFFs as an sRGB, right? Yeah,
for the most time, yes. So I believe like if I have to use like, let's say color, right, I should turn off that setting in there, because if I have, for example, like TX files can be RGB and they can be EXRs, for example, like 32 bits. So in that case, I would have to turn off that color correction, you know, so the auto, not the color correction, but the color settings, right? So basically here.
The rule you created, right?
Yeah. So in this case here, I would have to turn this one off, delete it, right? But the thing is, like, since I don't use the TX, I think that's basically what I had in there as raw, but I don't think I'm using it at all.
HDR, you have it raw? Sorry,
HDR I have, yes, HDR raw and EXR raw as well.
Okay.
It has to be raw, otherwise like the HDRIs get like a color distorted, you know. Sorry, Khaled, is that how you pronounce your name? Khaled Ibrahim?
Yeah. Khaled Ibrahim.
Khaled Ibrahim.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, man.
I'm just having a little question, just bugging me out.
Yeah.
About your resolution.
The resolution.
Oh yeah. I'm just see you render in 900 square. But when I do that, I just get a blurry result. I'm just ending rendering in 2K or 3K for my final render.
Oh, really?
But I don't know.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you have any of those presets loaded? Maybe like, because this one is going to render like 2K, but if you go just custom, it should be fine if you render 900 by 900. That's weird. Maybe like a hard reset in your Maya can help, but I'm not sure. One thing you can check is this. Check this out. I don't know if it's going to do anything different for you, but you can check. If you go under View and you go to your camera settings, you can just click this bar in here so it actually docks in there. You can always use like this resolution gate in here just to make sure that it's rendering square first. Oops, not this one here. So if I look in here, that's basically like, it should be 900 by 900 and it should tell you right there, right? 900 by 900. So when you look at your screen, what do you see in here? Do you see like more than 900 by 900?
No, I see it's like that, but I don't get a crisp result details.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, at 900, I mean, like you don't get a lot of detail. For example, if I want to get like it's like detail to show details, I would probably like render a close-up of the face and then keep the same resolution. Or like I said before, like you can increase like 200 by 1200 by 1200, and get like that far. But if you want to get like really, for example, like super fine detail on a bigger resolution, then you would have to definitely like increase the size in here. But as you increase the size, you have to be very careful with the amount of samples for your anti-alias, right? So if you're gonna go like really big, you're probably not gonna need a lot of anti-alias samples. But if you're gonna go small and try to get the maximum amount of sharp results, I would go higher in here, like probably like 10 or 12, something like that. Yeah.
So when I have lower resolution, I have to increase my samples?
That's what I normally do, It's like if I want to create like a crisp image, that's what I do. Because what happens is that like when you have your subsurface scattering and you don't have enough samples, what Arnold does and any other software does, it creates a lot of noise, right? Like, so you look at the subsurface and a lot of stuff like looks like artifacts, and it's actually just because you don't have enough samples. And then to prevent all that noise, you can actually increase the camera anti-alias. And that's basically what I do, It's like I use like, 10, 12 in here. And then I get like, obviously it's going to increase the render time, but I'm going to get very sharp results. But I'm going to tell you that like for the most part, if I'm doing something like, let's say, like this guy here, right? Like those renders are like the stuff I post on Instagram. And this is probably like about 8, So it's 8. And it gets like a very, very sharp, enough detail stuff. I would say that 6 would not do that. You have to have 8 or 10 at least, to be able to get like eyebrows definition. Otherwise, it's going to get just like super noisy, You're not going to be able to do much with it.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
No problem. And then the last tab we're going to look in here, actually, this is the one we were looking before. So instead of like GPU, you can switch to GPU, CPU from GPU to GPU in this new Arnold. But like I said, I still didn't have a lot of good results with it. I might try later, but I still keep CPU on. And this part here, I normally change to 16. So 64 here, what that means is that this is the size of each one of those squares when you render, right? When you render something in Arnold, you see those little squares, right? Like the render time. And then, so if I reduce that to 16, those squares get very tiny. So that means like, since I have a ton of processors and here I have like a 32 logical processors, that means that each one of them is gonna render this little chunk of 16. So I'm gonna see multiple places in the image at the same time being rendered, It's better than sometimes seeing like big chunks that takes longer to render until it jumps to the next part. I kind of like prefer to have the little, squares in there. But again, optional for you guys. And that's basically it. I mean, like people ask about the passes, You can actually add all those render passes if you want to plan to do all the, the color correction and everything in another software, for example. Then you have the option to add like the Z depth, like that's the Z, like RGB, albedo, we have the subsurface scattering. You can just like each one of those, you can actually add like this, right? You add another render pass. So it's going to be adding in there. And you can actually do this for everything. But in my case here, what I do is like, it's like I mentioned to people back in the day when I watched this documentary about like how they made Finding Nemo from Pixar. they're talking about like how they try to create a full scene without any passes. Basically, like what you see in your render view when you render, that's basically the image that's going to go to the movie. And I always try to do that, you know. It's like I try to get as close as possible as the final result I want in a single pass, and then I do just like a final color correction, a fast one, and then that should address a couple of things, and that's basically it. But if you want more control for your results, I definitely would recommend to, you know, it's like either going to the Arnold manual, they have this covered for you, and then like just like rendering everything in passes and then reassembling the scene either in Photoshop, you know, it's like being able to control like specular without having to repaint the maps. I normally paint everything, you know, it's like I tweak, repaint the maps until I get the results I want without relying too much on the post-processing, you know. But I was thinking about like starting a little sculpting session. I mean, like we got like half an hour only. So I think I'm gonna jump right into it and try to get a few things done. It's just like a start point, right? Like starting point. Because I gotta tell you, man, I'm rusty. I didn't work with 3D since October. No, actually November. And so I'm gonna just like reset my Maya here and try to get something done. And then you guys either like, if you have a subject already picked, I would say like, we can do this together, or you can just watch or whatever you want to do. And I'm gonna just show you like how I normally approach those things. And for example, like if I have this collection of pictures in here, I start very loose, you know, it's like I'm not like, I know some people start very, very carefully and try to nail like the primary forms from the get-go with all the distance correctly and everything. And I think this is a great approach, especially if you're a traditional sculptor. But like I said, because I rely so much on this comfort of having everything so flexible with the 3D package, you know, it's like I can actually go back and forth between primary, secondary, tertiary forms at any time I want. I actually make everything very free form. I'm gonna start like observing certain forms, putting them in place, and then moving to the next one, you know, it's like, and then refining after lots of iterations, but without necessarily nailing the primary forms from the get-go, you know. Which can be like very free in a way, but maybe not the wisest way to do it. But I'm gonna have to pick one guy actually that I want to go for, and I think this guy here is an interesting face, has an expression, has some different type of X-Gen work I'm gonna have to do. This ear here, I'm gonna have to probably, like, if I go for that, I'm gonna have to tweak my topology slightly to be able to accommodate those holes. But let's see. So I'm gonna put this one on the side. I'm just gonna move stuff around for a second here, make space for it. And like normally what I do when I start a new model, I start with a primitive, or either like a primitive, or I go to the light box, right? And I start with one of those models that come with ZBrush. So in that case, like last month or October, I started with one of those guys with the head plane, right? To create the Native American guy. In another, the first class I created was, I think it was it a sphere? Something like that. I don't think I did with the cube yet. I might be wrong. So it might be a chance to just start with the cube. But I'm gonna tell you, like, it doesn't actually matter. I would say like the planar head gives you a lot of stuff, but at the same time, sometimes if you want something more freeing, I would recommend to start with a very, very basic geometry, like a sphere or a cube, because that way you don't have any reference, you know, and basically, like, you know, in terms of proportion or whatever. So I'm gonna start with the cube in here. Let's just take a look at the topology here. It's good enough to start with that, but to be able to sculpt anything in ZBrush, you know that you have, if you start with the primitive, you have to make it a polymesh 3D, right? So I'm gonna click that one. So now it's a polymesh 3D. And what I can do, I can actually switch to my favorite brush here, which is the clay buildup, and also the move brush. So most of the work you're gonna be seeing, you're gonna be doing with move brush and clay buildup, right? I'm gonna switch to the clay buildup, and I can actually click this sculptures mode, which is pretty cool. Like if you already used it, you know that it subdivides on the fly, right? Basically, like subdivides where you need the subdivision to happen. And it's really cool because you can actually optimize the mesh by using the smooth brush, for example. And it's dependent on the size of the brush as well. So for example, if I use a brush of this size, you get this tessellation. If I make this brush much bigger, the tessellation is bigger as well, right? If I want something that's much more refined, the tessellation is much more, much smaller. So it depends on the size of the brush you're using. It's kind of cool. You can control a lot of stuff like that. So I'm just gonna press, you can press like W, E, or R to go to move, scale, and rotate, right? Either one of them is gonna give you the gizmo here. So the gizmo, I'm just gonna use it and click this guy here just to, create a little bit more of a rectangular shape. And then by pressing Q, I'm back to the edit mode, right? To turn on edit mode, obviously it's just like you press like T, right? Or click edit, and then you're in business. This is obviously, it's like, it should be self-evident, but some people still have problems like how to start with ZBrush, right? And the thing is like the most common thing is that you turn off that, and then all of a sudden like you're drawing things like crazy on the screen because ZBrush was written to be 2.5D, and all of a sudden you're trying to do 3D. So to prevent that, Control N, you clear the whole thing. So you just draw one time, and then you click edit, and then you're in 3D, right? So not 2.5D. Symmetry, you turn on with X. So you see like I can sculpt like both sides or just one side with X. So let's start doing a little sculpting in here. And I think the first thing we're gonna just be marking a couple of things. Let's turn off this polyframe. And then you can actually, it's like start maybe like shaving some areas in here. Maybe like, let's just do this. Let's shave that, make it a little bit more round. Can you actually create some planes in here as well? The best brush I think like to use when you're trying to define like some planes is this guy called Age Polish. So if you click this on and you click Age, now you have this guy available. So this is a pretty cool brush if you want to define some planes. For example, if you do this, right? You start defining planes. And that's important later on when you're actually doing some of the sculpture and trying to, review from time to time. You're going to go back and forth between the base mesh, like the primary forms and the secondary forms and everything. And then all of a sudden you push it too far, it's like with your secondary forms, and you want to restore some of the primary. You go to this brush here, you can actually recover a bunch of that. I'm kind of like randomly just screaming here. I'm not even paying that much attention just to show the brush, but let's start like pulling stuff for real here. So let's go to the move brush. So M for move. And then you can start like, either you can start pulling stuff, and really defining the areas you want to start, like eyes, for example. You're going to establish your eye sockets in there. The muzzle, you can actually pull it out a little bit, slightly. So I still have very low resolution, so I'm just going to smooth a little bit just so you can kick in with how you call like the Sculptures Pro, right? And another way I approach sometimes too is to actually pretend that everything is just clay, and just like using marks, it's like marking stuff. So like if you want to mark the eyes, it's like you can mark like that. If you want to establish, for example, like if I bring my reference here, I try to, to pretend like I'm sculpting with the clay sometimes, just like to have this feeling that you're actually doing something practical, which is a lie, right? We know it's a lie, but it's because I respect those guys a lot, like. So I have like, I'm gonna start, for example, like establishing some triangles, right? Like for example, if I look at the distance between the eyes, I'm gonna establish like the height of the eyes. And then for example, like I can bring just like a reference here for the nose, and then the base of the nose. Right? You can start like very simple lines like that. Establishing some stuff, but without being too crazy about it. And then obviously you can move stuff around, and then you can start building the forms. So let's do, for example, you can start with moving here. Oh, that's going to be hard with, that's the thing about not having the rest of the thing in there. So you're just gonna build up, like, let's say like this area. We're just moving there. Start building up the nose in here. And it's kind of like the same kind of like random start that you would have, for example, like if you have, if you're sculpting with clay, you're gonna be building some masses first. And then you're gonna start like adding more, removing some stuff, you know, it's like, but overall, just like it starts very messy, at least like my work. I've seen people, they're so neat, you know, it's like they start like super neat with stuff. And the model looks, you know, a lot nicer than my models when I start, for example. But the thing is, like, it's a matter of like how far you're gonna push the model, right? Sometimes you end up with a very super nice sketch, but then the model doesn't go too much further than that, you know? So I rather like start messy and just like really, might see this, really messy, and then start like actually building stuff up. So like his chin here is gonna be a hard one to actually decipher what's going on there, but we are gonna end up doing that. So I'm just gonna pull this up.
So Chris, now
Yes.
that we are at the point of choosing what we are going to do, I just had like a null model of actually an African person as well from a tribe.
That's awesome.
Would you recommend, for instance, to take advantage of your class fully, maybe to start with that, or just start over with whatever other thing?
I would leave it completely up to you guys. I mean, like, you'll be cool, you know, it's like if you all come with like a similar stuff would be really cool. But I mean, like, in every single class, I mean, like people just like decide, okay, I want to go for this actor or, you know, this celebrity or whatever. And then you can see like the gallery of my students, it's all different stuff, you know. But definitely like, I think I don't dislike the idea. It would be interesting.
I think it will be cool just because you are going to do the skin shaded for that. And I haven't seen very successful ones out there, at least the ones painted manually.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think could be a good exercise.
Definitely. Oh, definitely, yeah.
And another question I have now that you're starting with your sculpt will be, for me, the most difficult thing to get is the eye size, because is going to give you a good reference for the size of the rest. And then related to this is the perspective and the focal length you use in order to get stuff right.
We're going to be talking about that because it's very interesting. For example, like if I look at a picture of this guy here, my guy, he looks like an alien, by the way. You know, it's like if I look at an image like that, it's like, how can you tell what's the focal lens, right? Like I would say like, this is probably like, it doesn't look like an 85 because it has some perspective going towards like the back in there. But it's, I would say like probably like between 50 and, oh, it's hard to tell, man. 50 and 85, I don't know. But definitely not a 35 because the face is not totally distorted. But it looks more like a 50, I would say. You know, so I don't know. It's like a.
I guess you also get familiar of how a face looks based on your experience, right? Like
yes,
it's something that your eye gets used to.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, we're gonna be talking about like, because right now I'm just goofing around here because we are kind of like I spend a lot of time talking about all this stuff. But now I'm gonna just try to do something, but let's see. So far is looking terrible, but we're gonna get there eventually.
Hi, Chris. I have a question.
Yes.
When you are, you know, I know you're just starting the sculpt, and it's kind of a, you know, a fun thing to end the class tonight. But do you approach starting likeness sculpts the same way you would kind of what you're doing for this particular class, which is kind of an amalgamation of different references? Do you approach those, your sculpting for those in similar ways, like how you gather your references and how you analyze your references and that kind of thing? Or is it a different process for you?
Yeah, I think like this one is a little bit more freeing because I mean, like I can actually, trip with the whole process, right? Like kind of like creating a new human from a bunch of them. But the first two ones, like actually the first three classes, it was kind of like trying to really get to the reference, right? Like try to get the likeness correct, and that can be a little frustrating sometimes. Obviously, I mean, like I like the challenge and everything, but I just thought that for the series of ethnicities, it would be more interesting if, especially because I'm not working with like a celebrity or someone that people know, that would be more interesting to just experiment with it. Because at the end of the day, I would like to see, for example, although this is a class that's based on portraits for the most part, I would like to see people using similar techniques that we're going to be learning here to create, for example, like awesome creatures with like a super cool skin detail and things like that, And although I had this idea about like doing some of those classes about creature, for example, creature work, I kind of like try to adapt a little bit and bring this to like the human and trying to explore a little bit of this aspect of the creature, So I think that's the whole reason. But definitely, like when it comes to likeness, we're going to be talking about this tomorrow. We're going to be really talking about, it's like the lenses and all this stuff. But for today, I mean, like just because we had like a few minutes to squeeze, I'm going to just do like a quick sculpt here. And then tomorrow we're going to keep going with something a little bit more, today was mostly like an introduction and the most technical stuff. So you guys are familiar how to set up your scenes and everything. But then tomorrow we can definitely start with something more serious than this.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, it's I like seeing both ways. There's a lot of emphasis on likeness sculpting. I come from a traditional background where I do a lot of my own kind of what you're doing, which is not necessarily likeness work, just creating people or figures. So it's interesting to see the difference in process. Even if you have similar fundamentals, just how you approach likeness versus not likeness.
Yeah, definitely. It's
so,
like
thank you.
I think both of them are so. It's like at some point, I mean, like when you do this a lot for like professionally, right? For example, professionally, you have like all those references to get the actors' scans and things like that, and then everything is such a pressure to actually nail everything. It's like and it has to be perfect and all. But the fun factor kind of goes away. I think that's kind of like why it started a little bit more like those series of like having a little bit more free form, because it's just like likeness can get very boring if you don't have anything else to offer in terms of like where is the character, right? Like you just like you create something that's already there, make a portrait. It was like, oh great, like looks great, but it's almost like you miss a giant opportunity of putting a little bit of yourself, in those characters, and I think that's what's actually more fun for me these days.
Cool, that sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. But I mean, like, I'm going to leave it completely up to you guys. I mean, like the techniques we're going to be talking about, they're going to be applicable to anything, It's like if you really want to go for a creature, you can look at the work that like Palomita, when she didn't finish her job, but she was doing like the Stephen Hawking, And then Carlos, her boyfriend, was doing like, he did this albino ogre, and it looks pretty awesome. It's like, and he really used the same techniques and everything you're learning to create like a creature, right? Like, and it was so cool, man, to see that. And I got so jealous too, because I was like, oh man, I'm just doing those portraits, So I tried to give myself a little bit of freedom to at least like create my own Frankenstein kind of guy. It's like starting with reference from multiple people, and then using that. But yeah, it's very, very fun. I mean, some of my, the most fun I have is doing those portraits that look like clay portraits that I did. Like you can see the clay marks and everything, just because it looks like a physical piece, it takes just like 1 or 2 nights to do. And those are very fun to do.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a lot of questions about those as the class goes on.
Oh, definitely.
I have a lot of experience in ZBrush, but I did start with clay before, and one of the things that that I wish was in ZBrush is natural displacement. which is something that you get a lot in clay. You put one blob of clay somewhere, and naturally you kind of get secondary forms in other places just from your hands working,
definitely.
you know? And that's something that I feel like the brushes in ZBrush could be a lot more dynamic in displacing like that, like they do in clay. So I'm interested to see, you know, I just have a lot of questions about that kind of stuff as we go on.
And there's one of those classes I actually explored that, you know, it's like I opened all those clay models, and I showed them how to do the lighting and stuff. And some of my students actually use the same lighting setup and for the clay sculptures and everything. And I will show like all the examples of how I assemble those clay brushes to look like real clay. It's very fun, man. It's like one of the things that I like the most is like it's when something that's very freeing, you know. Like I said, like it's the most common thing that you get online is like when you're doing something like that, it was like, why are you doing that? Why you don't just like take a picture of the person? Like it's the most stupid comment, right? Because us artists, the first thing is about the challenge, right? Like what we want to challenge ourselves to create stuff, and it doesn't matter if there's a reproduction or not. And the other thing is like, come on, sometimes you're sculpting someone who already passed away many decades ago, right? I was like, how are you going to take a picture of that person? I'm idealizing a person, you know? It's like, so yeah, it's interesting. But you see, like at this point here, I'm just like really goofing around and trying to establish some forms in here, but without too many concerns. I'm probably going to keep going with this a little bit further tonight, and then I can post a little time lapse when I kind of like done with it. But I'm probably not going to go too far. When it comes to the chin itself, the most common mistake I think people do, they create a little sphere like that, right? And then, not like that, but just like a single form. And the chin is very interesting because and it normally has like this form right in the middle in here. And you have the secondary forms that come from the side. So you end up like having like 3 forms in the chin, you know? And sometimes it's very visible, sometimes they blend together, but it's definitely more complex than simply having, you know, those little forms. So let me just move. I'm just sculpting from one angle, and then you can see how bad it is from there. So I'm gonna start moving stuff. Oh, I'm gonna start moving stuff a little bit, just to get a little bit better angle. Just establish, put some more forms in here.
So, Chris, one thing that I wanted to ask you, like, do we still have access to download your previous courses through Vimeo or that kind of stuff that I hear on another program?
Oh, the thing about the Vimeo that happened is that I started those classes, right? Like really trusting that everything would be okay. And then in the first class, someone already pirated, you know, and then put in a website for, you know, for other people to download. And yeah, and that's very unfortunate, you know. It's like, because like I said, I mean, like I put a lot of I give a lot in those classes. I mean, like I never had a student complaining that, you know, it's like oh man, you didn't give the money was not worth it, you know. I normally give a lot of information, man, and then when you see something like that happen, it really sucks for everybody because it spoils it, you know. My intention from the get-go was to really allow people to download and have that, you know, like the videos themselves. And that's what I had like in the beginning. But then as soon as it leaked, I mean, like, what am I gonna do, you know? And then that's the whole reason I had to put up this entire website up, because at least it's, you know, it's a stream, but at least it's a little bit safer, you know. It's like it's not gonna stop anyone if they wanna do harm, right? Like, and really download stuff, and there are devices they can use and all. But at least it makes it a little bit more difficult. So, you know, that's, you know, unfortunate. It really spoils for everybody.
Well, but it's completely understandable for sure.
Yeah, it sucks, man. You know, it's like I just have to thank you guys for actually, you know, supporting and you know, it's like I guarantee that's at the end of the day you're gonna get a ton of information that really gonna help you. And it's really my pleasure to support artists. You know, it's like, you see what I do, for example, like by reposting the work that's done by my students in the past months, you know, it's like, it makes me so proud to see the results and everything. And I try to support as much as I can. But at the same time, of course, the minimum I expect is people like not to pirate my shit. But yeah, it happens, man. It happens.
One thing related to this is like how, like, I know that it's not a classic program, and you kind of do this thing and we do our thing. But is this Facebook page created to share the progress?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
The current progress, and then you give us feedback through that?
Yes, definitely.
Is something that we can save some time at the session and then you take a look to other people's screens? So I don't know how that.
Yeah, I mean, like, what happens is that, like, we have our official reviews, like it's bi-weekly, right? We're gonna have our reviews bi-weekly, but at the same time, I don't want to leave people hanging. Sometimes, like, you know, it's like you're trying to get something done, and you just like, man, I'm having such a hard time with this stuff in here. And then you know, it's like if people post in there in the forum or like the Facebook group, I try my best to actually, you know, at least not let people hang too long. I have to apologize, like basically when during this holiday season, because I was really involved with a lot of other stuff. But slowly I'm trying to catch up, you know, it's like with the people, you know, it's like in need of stuff. So that's why today I kind of like went there and I, you know, it's like posted and tried to help people as much as I could. But yeah, don't be shy about posting there. If you start doing any sketch today, for example, or you know, just post in there if you want to, and I can comment on it. You know, it's like my work's not gonna look any good today, but I'm still gonna post. You know, it's like at least a little, maybe not turntable, but how you say, like a time lapse right after this class. So at least people can see something that I did today, you know, because I mean, like I'm gonna force myself to keep working for the next 4 weeks, and then like I said, I'm gonna be forcing because there's no other way, you know. It's like either you force yourself or you don't get stuff done. That's why I did the floor here in my house, because I was like, man, I need this shit. I need to do it, otherwise it's not gonna happen.
Okay, so I will use then that page to post progress.
Please do, man. Yep.
Okay. And another thing related to that is, yeah, I send the invitation and my name is different than my actual name.
Okay.
But I think you know that. Anyway, it's QUIQUE.
Let's see. I can check right now. Let's see. Got 3 people here, so I hope we are all here. So Diana or Gianna. We got okay. Yeah, oh yeah. I remember. It's a different name. And Robin, okay. And
Diana is the right pronunciation.
Diana or Gianna?
Diana.
Oh, Gianna, yeah.
It's like Diana, but in Italian is Diana.
Diana, yeah, it's the same in Portuguese, yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we say like Gianna instead of Diana, right? In Portuguese.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, we say Gianna. Like Brazilians have this thing, like we say, it's almost like pronouncing like D-J-E, like G. But that's the way we pronounce. It's so interesting.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I have a question only because I don't have a Facebook.
Okay.
So, and I don't want to make a Facebook just because I actually just recently closed it.
Oh, yeah, totally. I understand that.
Is there another way to share? Would it just be just emailing and?
Yeah, you can email me. There is a way, for example, if you look at the website itself, I can show you here. Let's see. So if you look at the Fly on the Wall Studio, so you're gonna see there's a dashboard. Let's try. So let's see, if you have this one here, January, right? You're gonna have in your dashboard. And tonight, if you click this one here right now, you're only gonna see like some empty stuff. Like there's like just placeholds. So like lesson 1 is just a placeholder. There's nothing in there. But in about an hour and a half to 2 hours, you're gonna see the video in there that's gonna pop. It's gonna have a different title in here because it's probably gonna you know, accommodate whatever I spoke about. You're gonna adapt this text, and then you're gonna have the video. And then there's this button in here on the top that says discussions. If you click that one, you can create a new post in here. So you can put a title, you can post images and stuff, and I can deal with that as well, you know. if you prefer doing this way, I believe that way other people can see what you're asking and maybe like can help other people. Or if you prefer to do like personally, like an email or stuff, you know, I would do that for sure. But for anyone with Facebook, I would really encourage people to use the Facebook group because, you know, it's like if I answer a question you have and someone else has a similar question, it might definitely help someone. Like with one single post, I can help multiple people, you know. So that's always helpful. But yeah, definitely if you don't have Facebook, I'd be glad to actually help you with private stuff.
Is other people giving feedback on the Facebook? Because I'm pretty sure you have a lot of nice artists that already, well, I know you have already great artists that have taken the course.
Man, like they are very nice at actually giving feedback and stuff. And yeah, it's pretty cool, man. I like the place.
That's awesome because Artstation, man, is you don't get much feedback actually.
Yeah.
Other websites, right?
Definitely. Yeah, like Artstation is more like a kind of like a showcase, right? And then people are kind of like looking for jobs and stuff. That's why I don't think I post that much on Artstation, because every time I post something there, I get those emails from companies asking for, you know, it's like, do you do freelance? Do you do what? And I'm kind of like, I cannot do anything right now. So, but if people are looking for jobs and stuff, I would really recommend like Artstation posting that, because you get a lot of visibility, you know, and people really go after you. So
it's true, but there is a lot of ego going on there. There is a lot of, oh, I like your work, but mine is better, so I don't give you my like, and shit like that. I have seen amazing work that it has been seen for thousands, and it doesn't get like 200 likes, and that gets under my skin.
So for my standard brush here, the thing that I normally do, and I'm gonna be using this settings a lot. Some people use the dim standard, right? I don't use it because it has a pinch stuff. I know I can remove it, but I normally I got used just like using the regular standard brush. So I normally pick the standard brush. If you want to save as a different file, a different kind of brush, you can always do like a clone, right? So you're actually not messing with the original one. And then for the alpha, I normally assign this alpha number 39, alpha 39. And then the settings here, I go to the modify, and I normally crank this guy here into a curve like that, so it gets a little bit more pointy. And then the last thing I do, under stroke, I can just incorporate some lazy mouse, but instead of the default 0.25, I use a 0.02, which makes like, it removes those traces, you know, otherwise it gets all those little traces, gets like dot, dot, dot like that. So this way it actually creates a little bit more like I can actually carve stuff a little bit nicer like that. So I'm just gonna just establish some lines in here, kind of like almost like drawing, right? I'm gonna establish like a line in here, maybe like the corner of the eye right here, go up. And again, like this is very, very rough right now, right? But we're gonna progress with the file. We're gonna be probably gonna see exactly what I came all the way here, and then I'm gonna keep going from that point, like into something a little bit more developed. And then tomorrow we start from that point, and we keep doing this for a couple of days until we have something a little bit more decent. I'm just gonna establish some lines in here, kind of like almost like you know, sketching the surface. Those types of folds here I really like, because you know, it's like it's a combination of having like the eyelid itself and then the fold on the top, and those are always fun to sculpt. It's just like position, you know. I can actually, instead of like sculpting down, I can sculpt up just to establish that line at the top. And then obviously they're gonna have to, you know, it's like build those forms in there from the side and everything. But we just started this, so it's not gonna have a whole lot going on in here. But I just want to sketch and kind of like establish some forms.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. I just have a small question about the perspective in ZBrush. How much time do you end up working in perspective and not in perspective?
Oh man, I don't trust the perspective at all. I have to use it because otherwise it's flat, right? And I don't trust flat. But ZBrush, even though they incorporate this new camera and stuff, I never trusted it. I use the default 50. You know, sometimes I go to 85 depending on the camera. But for this type of portrait in there, I think like a 50, maybe even wider than that for this guy. It looks like his face is a little, kind of like it's compact, right? It looks very vertical. So I might have to go between 35 and 50, but I always gonna trust Maya's viewport better. That's why as soon as we have like the first sketch that we have, it looks like anything, right? Like something can look very rough, but as soon as we have something, we're gonna be transporting this into Maya, and we're gonna start like doing some renders with the actual light and everything, so we can actually judge the forms. Otherwise, there is no way to judge anything. I never trust that, it's like in ZBrush, I'm going to be able to trust anything, Yeah, it really drives me nuts sometimes. And the fact that sometimes you bring a model and it comes like in a funny proportion as well. It's like there's all kinds of, the advantage of ZBrush obviously is this amazing capacity of sculpting so many polygons and doing it in such a clever way, right? Like with this like 2.5D thing that they established. But at some point, I think they're going to have to rewrite the program a lot to be able to incorporate new techniques out there, It's just, yeah, I'm going to have to deal with it the way it is for now. But eventually, Ofer is going to create something magical again, because the guy is freaking genius, man.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have one other question.
Oh, sorry. Who is first?
I think the other guy was speaking. I interrupt. Sorry.
It's okay.
I had a really quick, simple question. Maybe it's a long answer, but
okay.
I'm just curious about when you go down a road. This is something that I notice when I sculpt, is that I get option paralysis, or like I get blocked with the creative options, like which way I want to go.
Uh-huh.
In this case, you're going with it in this direction, and this might be how you take this character forward, but how often do you find yourself wanting to steer very far away from what you've decided on? And how do do you just make a decision and run with it? Or do you actually, do you oftentimes find yourself departing from what you initially set out to create?
All the time, man. Like, especially with the Native American guy. It's like, if I show you like the initial model, it was completely different, And the thing is, like, those classes are very, it's like if you're an artist, right? Like they're kind of risky in a way, because you see like most of the classes out there, people just like, they don't take the risks. They are very careful about like creating something that looks really cool and perfect. So all the videos are edited and everything, it's like, so everything looks like pristine. And, but I'm such an idiot, it's like I expose myself a lot by being like, it's like doing stuff in a very unconventional way sometimes, and then at the risk of people out there like judging how I do stuff, Yeah. But the thing is, like, it's such a trip for me to never know the destination, It's like, and I think that's what I learned with those challenges I did in the past, like back in the day when I used to do those challenges, CG Talk and everything, to just like, it's like I never knew where I was going. For example, like I would have a simple sketch about something and I would just like start building on it. And then all of a sudden, like you have something that just evolves to something else. It's a very organic process, And I think that's why I'm excited these days to just like create those fictitious characters based on real people like that, but without having an idea who we're going to be following. You see, like I started with this guy because I thought he has interesting features, but eventually, like tomorrow, I might think about like, for example, like, okay, but what about this girl? She has some very interesting stuff going on as well. Maybe I can incorporate some of the, the scarves or something like that. Or, it's like, it's just like, it's a way for me to try to do portraits, but keeping some room for creativity, It's like, that's always, that's driving me these days. Otherwise, I think I would be a little bored, like just like doing like likeness, like straight away likeness. But this one, it keeps me a little bit more free, But I definitely want to go back and really, it's like teach like specifically, it's like I did with the classes of May and June and July, really teach about like the likeness and it's like, it's just like I thought like, okay, after 3 of those, I think I can have 3 or very free ones, kind of like so people can use some of those techniques for a creature, like I said. and then from this point on, maybe return to that point, or maybe like explore something different. Like I said, like let's do some creatures now, you know. Yeah. So I want to make sure that since I'm giving, you know, it's like this thing about like every time you buy one of those live classes, I give you like the 3 previous classes, for example. I want to make sure that the content is rich, you know. It's like, so people have interesting stuff to look at. For example, you know, it's like if it was all like just straight away portraits, I think people would be a little bit bored, you know. It's like after like how many of those I can produce, right? I'm gonna have like maybe like 6 of those, and then what, right? So I think it's just like an attempt to actually create something a little bit more rich when it comes to the content, but definitely keeping that same line, you know, kind of like you know, trying to create something cool that can help people with the information, you know, like, and really living completely free for people to use that to their advantage.
Yeah. Hello, Chris.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Sabrina. Nice to meet you.
Sabrina.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. I just wanted to know, like, are you gonna project on the topology that you showed before this model, or are you gonna retopologize by end?
Yeah, you know, it's like there are a couple of things I can try to do. For example, like in the past, I would always use the same model. So, for example, the same model, you see the same topology that I did for all those models, they are interchangeable. Basically, like you can morph each one of them to another one. And I did that way because when I was starting to do like those realistic portraits, my idea was, okay, why do I have to reinvent the wheel every time, right? If I have a model that I can reuse, for example, like a lot of the maps, then it's going to be cool. So that's how I planned it. But I have no problem, for example, like, you know, if I need to just to show, for example, like start really from the scratch, you know. Oh, by the way, talking about reprojection and everything, like the last class of October, I was in contact with the guys from ZRAP, right? Like the Russian software, and they were super nice. The guy said like, "Oh, I'm a fan of your work," blah blah blah, and then of course, like I can help. So he sent me a bunch of licenses. I believe it was like 30 licenses for ZRAP, and I asked my students from October who wanted it, because not everybody wanted it, because you have 1 month free, so you can actually just do like a trial, right? And so you have that month free. But a couple of my students asked for the license, and I think I gave away maybe like 12 of them. So that means I have still like a license, and I believe they are valid for about, I think it's like a year, but then a year is starting to count from October. So it's still like more than half a year left. So I can, we have to discuss how we're gonna do this, because I can give away all of the left ones to you guys. But like I said, I mean, like you can simply go to the website and download for free, you know, and then have that available for a month. But, you know, I don't know if you should do like a first come, first serve, or if we wanna find a different way we can actually give this stuff away. But I still have license for sure.
Oh, that would be cool.
Yeah. The guys were super nice. The only thing that he asked, he said like, you know, I have no problem giving those licenses to help your school and everything, but please, every time your students post something, please mention the company. You know?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. So if you guys are the lucky ones to get the software for, you know, a license, then just like make sure that you post stuff to help them out. The guys are super nice, man. Like I don't know them personally, but super nice. Other guys are very nice too. If you want to take a look, are those guys from this is the website we're going to be using a lot actually from this point on when we start doing the renders. It's called HDRI Haven.
Oh yeah.
Right, and those guys have a ton of HDRIs. This is the jackpot, right? This is the mother load. And then they have like all kinds of stuff. Most of the HDRIs I use from their website. And the thing is, like, they accept donations because they, again, I'm not affiliated with them, but I'm just saying, like, they do amazing work. They keep like updating stuff all the time. And if you click at any image if you never use those guys, you click, for example, any of those, right? Click this one. They have everything in multiple resolutions all the way to, in this case, 20K. So like gigantic files. I normally use just 4Ks. And the thing that's cool about those guys is that if you donate to them every month, I think I donate like probably like $3 or $4, $3 or $5 a month or something like that. If you do that, they give you access to their Google Drive. And then in the Google Drive, you basically like, you can, in one scoop, you can download all those maps, which is really cool, you know? So yeah, it's another website, like people doing good work that, you know, deserve to be supported, just like the ZRAP guys, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Always good to support people doing.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
So at this point, you've kind of moved on to secondary forms and that kind of thing here and there, right? Or started to, at least. I wonder, even though you're just free sculpting like this,
yeah.
How much of your approach to secondary forms is, you know, just your previous anatomy knowledge, and how much of it is, you know, copying forms in your reference, or the mix of the two? How do you kind of approach, you know, secondary forms when you're working off a reference like this?
It's a good question. I mean, like, when I was working on those portraits, like Rick Baker and all those guys, I was actually trying to start with something that was very vague, you know, kind of like on purpose, because I was like, oh, what happened in there? There's a hole in there. What happened in there? Did they hide it? What? I don't know. There's a hole in my mesh. Yeah, it's like, I think it's a combination of both, you know. It's like, it's one is actually trying to first, like, reasonable knowledge about the anatomy, right? Like the you know, like position, like for zygomatic bone and things like that. The nose, you know, it's like a brow ridge and things like that. But the other one is actually trying to see things in there and try to incorporate, but also crisscrossing that with the knowledge, you know. That's the thing that's fascinating to me, because if you have like all those references, if someone is modeling something for Madame Tussauds, for example, they're gonna have the actor in the studio, and they're gonna take like multiple pictures of all kinds of angles, and you're gonna have that like available to recreate like something like to perfection, right? But in this case here, for me, the challenge is like, okay, I'm imagining this person, and I have to do it in a way that looks like a convincing character, but not necessarily, you know, it's like nailing the likeness the way it is, because I don't have all the reference like to crisscross like different angles and things like that. So that's like part of my trip these days, like just to try to create something that looks convincing, but without having all the information. Especially this type of stuff is fascinating to me, because I cannot even see like the fine detail in his skin. So my intention is to actually go and find like a higher resolution images that I can see some bumps and stuff like that. I can actually capture, incorporate to it. But it's almost like the trashier, the better, you know? But yeah, but definitely like, since I'm just sketching here, you see like I'm mixing primary and secondary forms as I go.
Yeah.
But I promise you guys that like tomorrow, I'm gonna be breaking up this stuff and then and explain exactly how I'm approach this stuff. I'm actually doing this one more like you know, it's like to fill up that space that we had at the end, and just to get something done, you know. Yeah. But definitely like tomorrow, let's break up, and there's plenty of like secondary and primary forms to explore still. And then for today, I'm just gonna end up right now. We're kind of like 20 minutes late, but no problem. It's the first day, you know. And then I'm gonna post this one. You guys can see how it turned out. Like it's gonna be like probably not much more than this, you know. But you should have the video available in about I think like an hour and a half. It takes some time to actually compress it and you know, do the whole shebang. And then tomorrow, then we get into more like the meat and potatoes about like the likeness. Let's talk about like studio lighting, and how to, for example, like if you see pictures of someone like in a red carpet, you know, it's like how, like little tricks you can try to find to actually discover, you know, it's like an approach for the approximate number for the camera lens that's being used, you know. Paparazzis, they're probably going to stay from far away because they don't have access to the red carpet itself. So you're probably going to have like a, it's like a zoom lens or something like a 7200 or whatever they want to use, So you're probably going to have like a little bit more of like a flat kind of form in there. And then, but yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. I'm going to be pointing you guys to a couple of websites as well. You can look at the tips about like portraits and likeness. But yeah, we're definitely going to get into all this stuff. Today is just like trying to have fun with you guys and getting to know the process, and that's it. But I'm glad you guys made it. So happy to see like there's a lot of artists I admire for a long time. It's like in every single class is like that. It's like it's very humbling to me. Like people I follow, that I admire the work, and people just subscribing to my class, very humbling. And in my mind, it's like obviously I'm getting paid is great, right? But it's just like the fact that I'm working with a bunch of artists who have the same similar interests, creating something. It's almost like a group, a study group, that we're just studying together. And for me, it's always a challenge because, like I said, I never know where this is gonna go, and I'm always like to discover the character in the middle of the process. Sometimes it takes me a couple of days, sometimes it takes me like weeks until the soul is, you can see the soul, you can see the character in there. It's like, and sometimes I keep searching forever, until I can actually feel the character in there. So that's part of the trip that I think is so cool. But thanks again, guys. Gonna let you go, and then gonna keep working a little bit more, and meanwhile gonna upload this video already. So thanks a lot, and I see you tomorrow at the same time.
Thanks, Chris.
Cool.
Thank you.
Chris. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
See you guys.
Good day, good night.
Good night.
Cheers.
Good night.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.